The stress cycle is our relationship to our autonomic nervous system. Everyone has heard the word burnout, or I'm burnt out. This is the mechanism that is named after. We burn out our autonomic nervous system. So what does that mean? There's two sides. The sympathetic, so that's the one that gives us the energy to do these things. And then the underside is the parasympathetic, the one that goes, oh. So when we looked around the room, and those of you that like settled, that was engaging your parasympathetic. And it's broken for most of us. I'm guessing most of this room, type A folks? Yeah, mostly? Disproportionately at least? I don't know where I fall on that spectrum, but we are really good at this side of it. Oh, there's a mission? Go. There was a number of people that came early, and just as a fun little thing, I said, hey, the task for this morning is to make sure that we have about 6 people per table. And some of these folks were like, oh, task, yes, I can do that thing, right? That is a sympathetic reaction to that moment. And that's great, right? We have to be able to have this energy to do what we need to do. However, what's really difficult is what comes after that. So if we look back to board 3 back here, those are the things that we're like, oh, I wonder how those things relate to this. Right? So I put a green arrow on some of them and then a red arrow on some. Alcohol, we talked about alcohol. Yeah. We think alcohol does this, and it does, right? In mild amounts, right? It kind of like depresses, and when I use the word depress, I don't mean like clinical depression. I mean pushing down energy, like depressing energy. The idea is that we go through our days, and there's just all these cycles, activation, settling. So we wake up in the morning, activated, and then we look around, settle. And then we get up and hopefully go to the bathroom. So we're activating our body to do that thing, and then we stand or sit there, and then we're kind of deactivated. And there's all these cycles that we can start to imagine of what this looks like. When we were talking about landing, right, when we're getting ready to land a plane, right, our body needs to activate. If it didn't activate properly, that's a bad thing, right? Similarly for my work and what we're doing today, if I just stood up here and talked like this all day and talked from my slides, maybe even had my back to you most of the day, I mean, y'all would pass out. Y'all would be ordering the rest of your Christmas presents, right? It'd be a terrible, and you'd look terrible, right? And you're like, why? Yeah, you're like, enjoy your lunch. I think we have the rest of this figured out. We're good, right? So I need energy to think about this, to hold the container for the room, to think about what's, right? I need some level of that. But if it was too high, as you can imagine, I'm gonna be a mess, right? I'm gonna be super distracted, right? I'm gonna be thinking about what I have to make for, what time was my flight, right? I'm just gonna have too much going on, because what happens in that moment is there's too much energy in the system. So we need to find these ranges of where we are just optimally functioning. And that's what this looks like. So there's this range of resiliency that says, as long as the vast majority of things that I do happen within this range, I'm good. Good news, bad news. It changes. It changes every day, changes on our sleep, changes on our diet. When I was talking to Paula, I don't know, probably a month ago now, talking about your constraints about flying, your constraints about sleep, the pressure that then puts on, right? And I was just trying to imagine like how that changes how this range works, right? When we're talking about the body, the more that we can move through life, having our body dictate this upper threshold, our body then does this, and this is super important. Our body says, hey, thanks for paying attention. You know what? Tomorrow, you get more energy. And that's how it expands. If I stayed up, so I hate staying up late at night. I hate it. Because I know the next day I'm gonna be a mess. It's so critically important. If I'm not in bed, I love being in bed by 9. If I'm up at 9:30, I'm starting to get a little edgy. 10 o'clock, I'm pissed. Like, why am I up at 10 o'clock at night? I mean, granted, I wake up at like 4:15, so it's,
there's two of us in the world.
It's proportional. But I know that if I don't get that, I got less tomorrow. And my goal is to just continually be expanding mine, right? I talked about my running. I started with a 5K. That was it. I started with a 5K. And it took me a year to do a 5K. And then, right, I just steadily, because if I train too hard, I'm gonna get hurt, right? So that's where we crash. So the same is true with our work, same is true with our relationships. We have to be curious about what these upper thresholds look like. Notice that this isn't a binary thing either, right? It's on a scale. So, mid-flight, that's not working very well. Mid-flight, I imagine you all can maybe hang out in like this range, right? You don't need, so this is probably like a 4, 5, 6-ish on the activation, right? We're just talking about activation. As you get ready to land, the healthy thing to do, right? Again, this is healthy, is there's more energy that gets put into your system to meet what's required. And that's natural and healthy and helps us function. And then, where I get really curious, and I'd love to hear from somebody about this, is what does an upper threshold look like at the end of a flight, right? So where does that transition?
What I was just kind of thinking about is it's not necessarily into the flight, but it's, I get to the hotel, it usually takes me at least an hour, possibly 2 to fall asleep because you're still coming down off of that.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be prep, let's rush, not in a bad way, but to get everything put together, clean, stocked, so we can get the hell out of there so I can start that process of going to bed, because it's going to take a while.
Yep. Yeah, so 2 things that you bring up, that's really great. One of which is, how are we practicing this, right? I was talking about Dr. Dustin here. When we're walking there, right, he's really focused on his patient, but then as we're walking, it comes down just a little bit, right? And the idea about even just these micro transitions is so that it just doesn't keep going up and up and up. Because it's really difficult to fall asleep at night if we don't practice this, right? This discharge, this parasympathetic, that's how we fall asleep. If you have any sort of sleep issues, if you have any sort of issues turning it off at the end of the day, dedicate your life to your parasympathetic nervous system. Because it's that side of this that if we can get that right, most people that I work with do this in spades, right? They do this, like they are built for this. But this one, it's like, this has always been seen almost as like a weakness of like, oh, I can push through. Like, I can do more than you. I can do more than you. Right? It's this competition of pushing ourselves. But that's not the end goal, right? If we burn out and then we're pissed off and then we can't stop drinking, right? One would say that's a problem, right? You might lose your license. I've been the first part of my career on physicians who were on the verge of losing their license because they were, had a blood toxicity in the OR, right? That's a problem that's related to their job. So what was missing for those, and probably a lot of you, is this piece right here. So there's the big come down. You can look at these cycles as this is what a day looks like. You can look at this cycle of this is what a minute looks like. So even that pause that I just did right there, I'm going, just for a second. I'm just bringing back a little bit, and then I'm going. We can have these micro moments all the time. When we, right before liftoff, that might be a moment to just check in on this for 5 seconds, just like, whew, let's go. Just that, because we're engaging that parasympathetic just for a second, and then being able to bring that back on. Because remember what I said about burnout. Burnout says this doesn't work anymore. And the reason that it doesn't work, for a lot of people I work with, is because this side of it doesn't work. Well, here's the problem with that. You notice how big this is, right? So this is what a daily life looks like. So what happens if, because our parasympathetic doesn't work, then we have to drink a disproportionate amount, or we stay up late because we just can't turn it off. Well, then our body goes the next day, it's like, hey, I love you, I care about you. Clearly you had a really big day. So I'm gonna give you a little less energy, just so you rest. But how do we respond? We're like, that doesn't really work for me. It doesn't work for my company. It doesn't work for my family. So then we artificially dial that up, right? With stimulants or other sorts of all sorts of things. And we're taking out a loan on our sympathetic nervous system that we have to pay back at some point. And notice just like these massive spikes that were probably, so instead of this nice smooth, I'm waking up, here's my day, I'm going to the bathroom, I'm having some breakfast, right? This is what we want our lifestyle to look like, these nice smooth activation. But with all of these artificial things that we're placing in, we get these really big spikes. And what's super cool is we can track it. So this was me this morning. So on my computer, I have this little thing that hooks up to my ear, and this is heart rate variability. And what this is really tracking is, are we in flow? So this is where we're able to pull in some really cool data. So you notice these big spikes. So this is where I was thinking about something that boom, activated me big time. And these are like in a second, right? My heart rate variability spikes. So that's less good. Obviously that's less good. Even these ones that are sharp, so I was pretty dialed in when I started. Notice how smooth that is. I'm doing good. It's like boom, something, a thought just popped, right? Notice how smooth and regulated these are. That's great. So we actually have computer programs now where we can train ourselves whether we're in that spot. And that's really exciting. So, it's basic biofeedback sorts of things. So that was only, less than 5 minutes. But 62% of that time, I was basically in a flow state. Because I've trained myself to be able to get there really quick. And then I pop out when I'm like, oh, I'm going to talk in front of 50 people for 4 hours. I hope that goes, right? But it didn't stay dysregulated for a long time. That was just a fear and a thought, and I have them all the time. And then I was able to bring it back down within seconds, right? Because this is all a heart variability representation of our nervous system. So I'm talking about the body, right? Talking about this parasympathetic now, you all have agreed is the most important thing in your life, right? Patrick, how does that show up in my body? Well, for me, so I'm an image guy. So on my insides, if I'm feeling heavily activated, right? Not good, but just heavily activated. And I need to downshift, deactivate. I can do without the sound on that. So we're talking about activating and settling. Activating. So I imagine what are the things for me, I'm from Michigan, I went to the snowiest college in America for undergrad. So snow falling, I just imagine that that's what's happening in my body as settling is taking place.